What's up? My name is Jake. I studied biblical history at Moody Bible Institute, and today I want to talk about prophecy. And prophecy is a difficult subject because it's just so broad. And it's also very different from how a lot of us view it in modern American culture. In the Bible, especially historically in the Bible, prophecy was not used as a fortune-telling way to look into the future and see something that's going to happen. In fact, oftentimes, a lot of the prophecies in the Bible were not known to be prophecies until thousands of years later when they came true. And a lot of that has led to people viewing the Bible in strange and interesting ways. And there's a lot of controversy on that. Like, some people look at the book of Revelation as a book that is going to come true exactly as it says. Other people look at it as a lesson that was used when the book was written by John, and he said, here, go read this and learn from it. There's a lot of different views on that, but prophecy is very different from what we as modern Americans think of it as. We think of it as telling the future through the power of God and God using his prophets, but that's not actually true, especially from an ancient Jewish perspective. In the Bible, prophecy, when the Bible was written, was used as a way to teach people in the moment. Prophets were not known as people who were seeing the future. They were known as people who were the mouthpiece of God. And this is another piece that points towards the beauty of creation. It's just the way that God speaks through people and then fulfills the things that he himself spoke later. But a lot of that is because the Bible is written as a gigantic poem. And I think that's super important. The Bible isn't a poem in the sense of a made-up poem that someone wrote as a beautiful piece of art. The Bible is a poem because God wrote the universe beautifully. He didn't write it to just kind of run like a broken machine. God created the beauty of creation to work beautifully and to be written out beautifully. And we can see that starting off in Genesis just as an incredible way to see the start of that story. If we go to Genesis 1, I just want to point out the way that the structure of a lot of the Bible uses prophecy to both tell us a lesson in the moment and also teach us something in the future. And then to see that poetic structure in the Bible. So the way that the Bible is a poem is really most evident in Genesis 1 in the way that the days of creation are laid out. And I'm just going to read through those for you, and then we'll talk about that really quick. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to tell you what each day was, and then we'll go through that. So, in Genesis 1, if you look at verse 3, it says, And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. There was evening and morning the first day. So first day, God said, Let there be light. He separated light and darkness. Day 2, verse 6, And God said, Let there be a vault in between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and morning the second day. So first day, separated light and dark. Second day, separated water and sky. Third day, and God said, Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. Evening and morning the third day. So day 3, separating the water from the land. So we got light and dark, water and sky, and then dry land. Now let's look at the next 3 days, 4, 5, 6. Day 4, and God said, Let there be lights in the vault to the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. So in a mirroring of day 1 that separated light from dark, day 4 separates day from night, which is really cool because you look to day 1 and you see it mirrored across on day 4. And then if we look at day 2, in comparison to day 5, day 2 was about separating the ocean from the sky. Day 5, and God said, Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the sky across the vault of the sky. And there was evening and morning the 5th day. So day 2 gives us the separation of the ocean and the sky, and then day 5 gives us the creatures of the ocean and the sky. And then, of course, day 6, day 3 gives us the dry land. Day 6, and God said, Let land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock and the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. evening and morning, the sixth day. God saw that it was good. And so if you look at the structure of the way that Genesis is written, it gives us a hint as to what prophecy was meant to be. Each of these things were created, the separation of light and dark, the separation of land and sky, and then the dry land, to be mirrored over in the later parts of creation with the separation of day and night, the creatures of the ocean and sky, and then the creatures of dry land. And each of those mirror across to each other, but they're each their own separate part. So each of these days has its own written out paragraph saying, this day is its own story, and it was good. Prophecy works exactly like that in the Bible, where someone will work as the mouthpiece of God, and they'll say, this is a message coming from the Lord. And if you read through the minor prophets, there's so much of this, where a prophet will say something, and they'll say, I have a message, I'm going to give this message. And they're not telling the future, they're just saying, these are the words of God. And there are instances where those things later come true, and they're used as a lesson later on, especially in the life of Jesus. Jesus so often would call back to the prophets and would say, these are the words that came from the mouth of God, and they are now coming to fulfillment. But it wasn't intended to work as a fortune teller. It was intended to work as a lesson in the moment. And a great example of that can be found in Psalms. If we go to Psalms 22. Yeah, Psalms 22. It's a great, perfect example of pointing towards a later fulfillment. And it wasn't ever intended to be. Psalm 22 was written for the director of music to the tune of The Doe of the Morning, a Psalm of David. And it's basically just written out as this story of David because he wrote psalms of rejoicing and psalms of lament. Psalms of rejoicing just being about, God, you are so good, this is such an incredible part of my life. And then the psalms of lament being about the sorrow that he's feeling, the weight that he feels as the king of Israel. And so Psalm 22 is one of those psalms of lament. He's writing about how hard his struggles are. But I want to read down in Psalm 22:14 and then just go further down from there. It says, I'm poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, and it's melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garments. But you, O Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Does that sound familiar? As a Christian, when I first read this, it blew my mind because it wasn't a part of some pastor's sermon. It wasn't part of some lesson. I was just reading through the Psalms, and then I read, they pierce my hands and my feet. My bones are out on display. They divide my clothes up and they cast lots for them. That should sound so wildly familiar to us because that's the story of Jesus' crucifixion. They pierced his hands and his feet. His bones were on display with having been whipped open. His clothes were divided amongst the centurions that were guarding over him, and they cast lots to see who would get his clothes. And that was written as David just being like, I am going through something rough right now, and I need to cry out to the Lord. But that later came true to be a part of David's story, to where he would look at it and point forward, and he would say, these are the words that God gave me. And then Jesus lived out those same exact moments. And this story itself is so incredible because the earliest example that we have, the earliest manuscripts we have of Psalm 22 come from BC. They are old manuscripts, and a lot of them are found in the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, which I actually had the opportunity to go see. And just being able to look and see physically in front of you the evidence of your faith is one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. But these scrolls, the part where David talks about all of these things that happen, come from before the story of Jesus happened. So we have the evidence that this predates Jesus. But then when he lived through those things and lived out the crucifixion and paid for our sins on the cross, those things are recorded outside of just the Bible, and we have the evidence that those things were fulfilled. And so prophecy oftentimes was used in the moment to teach a lesson to the reader, but there's also so many times where it came true as a foretelling of the future. And God does the same thing in our lives. He uses the Bible and all the different stories that are in here to teach us about the things that we need to know for ourselves. But there are also so many instances where you can sort of see the future through the Bible. But you can only see it if you follow in the things that he says. And the reason that that's so important is because of his covenant with us. If you follow your end of the bargain, if you take your salvation with Jesus and you give your heart to him, he has promised that you will have eternal life with him. And this is a promise that he fulfills. This isn't something where you look at it and you're like, wow, I hope he's good for it. No, this is a promise that he is fulfilling and following through on. He has given us the offer of salvation, and all we have to do is take it. And for those of us that have taken it, we are held accountable because we know this message. It's our job to give it to other people. And we can't just stand here and wait and hope that other people come around to it. We have to bring it to them. We are actively dragging people out of the gates of hell. And if we're not, then we're going to stand there on the day of judgment and we're going to watch our loved ones walk into hell and be cast there. And I personally don't want to stand there knowing that I could have done better. And so when we look at prophecy, I want it to be one of those things where we do know that it does point towards the future. It does point towards our salvation. It does point towards the goodness of God. But also being able to take those things in the moment and to be able to learn and live and know because of the lessons that are taught to us now. So I hope that you got something from that. If you have any questions, please let me know. Just drop a question down below. I'll love to answer it. I'll make a video about any questions that you guys have. But I've been Jake. I am Jake. I studied the Bible at Moody Bible Institute, and I just love to talk about it. But until next time, thank you guys so much.